Now, do you think that they are targeted because they're in foster care, or
Yes.
is they just falling victim more than the normal child because of the circumstances?
I think it's both. I think traffickers know that children in foster care, many of them are not, nobody's looking for them.
How would they know who's in a foster care program and who isn't?
I have no idea. I do not know how traffickers know that. I don't know. I don't know how it works. I don't know how long they stalk them. I have no idea how a trafficker's mind works. But here's something I learned about human trafficking the other day that I will say to your audience, who is so wonderful to be watching in this hard conversation, that I'm going to spread some hope. I'm going to spread some love and some light at the end of the tunnel. But this is not that moment. So if this conversation's already been hard for them, now is the time to go get a water.
They're used to it.
So anybody else, here we go. Because I learned this the other day, and I was literally on a flight, and I thought things from foster care could not shock me. And I almost barfed like on the plane. I was like, I don't think I can handle this. All right. I have fact-checked this 7 ways to Sunday. So I am 100% confident about what I am about to say. There is no federal law, nor is there any state law in any of the 50 states that makes it a crime to adopt a child out of foster care for the explicit intent of sexually exploiting that child. It's not illegal.
What do you mean it's not illegal?
There is no law. So let's say trafficker A knows this, and this is already going on. Because I was like, should I say that on the show? Is this educating people how to traffic? No. Traffickers already know all this crap. That's why I'm like, you're like, how do they know if they're in foster care? I'm like, I don't know. I just know that these people have a insatiable demonic hunger for children, and I don't know how they figure it out. Okay. Right now in all 50 states, if a trafficker adopts a child out of foster care for the intent of selling them for sex, there is nothing the government can do. It is not prosecutable. There is a loophole in the system, but it gets so much worse than that. When a person adopts somebody out of foster care, they're given all the parental rights that a normal biological parent would have. Okay? So I have the same rights over my adopted children as I do my biological children. Samesies. Trafficker A knows this. Trafficker A adopts a child out of foster care with the intent of sexually exploiting them. It's not prosecutable.
How is it not prosecutable?
It is not a law. And by the way, it has been brought up. Congress is aware of this gap. Congress is aware of this gap. This situation apparently has been discussed in Congress. Nobody's doing anything about it.
Congress doesn't give a fuck about kids.
I don't even know.
Epstein shit. Look at the entire fucking administration.
That's a whole different episode you and I can talk about.
But they don't care.
They don't, I guess.
They don't give a fuck about anything but patting their own pockets. Everybody knows, almost everybody knows it. Maybe the extreme right and extreme left don't realize it yet, but that's who the fuck they are. That's what our government is.
Speaking of that, before we continue with Trafficker A and the adoption, let me tell you how I got into this whole situation. So I found out when I booked General Hospital. It's 2011. I booked General Hospital. I booked this movie called The Artist. It was nominated for 10 Academy Awards. It won 5, including Best Picture. Amazing. I'm on the map. And my publicist at the time, who promptly got fired, she's like, you need to, I'm thinking about what is going to be the subject that I talk about, right? I'm all into the world water crisis. I'm a school tour speaker. It's true. There's a water crisis going on. The facts are there's more people that die in the world every day than war, malaria, and AIDS combined. Horrible. Clean drinking water, such an easy solution. It was a great thing to talk about. I talked about it for years. There's a lot of celebrities talking about that because it's a really cool issue. It's very clean. It's very easy. There's a solution. It's very easy to talk about. So I start praying because I'm a person of faith. And I literally feel like the Lord's like, you need to look into what's going on in your own backyard. And I was like, what's going on? What issue? He was like, this is all great, but there's people already talking about this. There's an issue that needs sunlight that nobody's talking about. So I'm in my office, start looking on charitynavigator.org because there, I'm sure you know, are a lot of horrible charities that don't do at all what they say they're going to do. I always tell people, I'm like, listen, if charity wants you to support them, ask them for their $9.90. That's their tax return sheet. You better look at their $9.90 and know exactly where those dollars are going because anybody will ask you for $1, but you better know where it's freaking going because there's a lot of bad nonprofits. that are totally profiting off of your, generosity of heart. This is 2011. I come across what is now called, and you're well versed in it, child sexually explicit material. Okay. In 2011, it's just called child pornography. We don't call it child pornography anymore because, of course, that implies consent, and the kids, of course, do not have any consent. And I find out that the United States, like you said, is the number one producer and consumer of child pornography in the entire world. It's not Thailand, and it's not, Russia and all these countries we want to point our fingers at them and be like, ew, child brides, whatever. No, we're the number one producers. We're the number one exporters. The average victim is under the age of 5. So back in 2011, before Snapchat, which was one of the worst things that ever happened to children, Snapchat is the devil. And the dark net wasn't fully it wasn't as dark and deep as it is now, right? 2011 was still a time when basically, and I'm oversimplifying this, but whatever, the broad strokes is true. Basically, you could monitor from cell phone reception towers and you could figure out which IP address is where is the house that's making these child pornography files. I'm just going to call it child porn because it's easier to say, okay? If I'm in California, you're in Tennessee, and I create child pornography and I toss it over to you via email, however they were doing it, it now kind of it falls under federal jurisdiction because it's crossed state lines. So that sort of lifts a lot of the parameters, or at least at the time, maybe things have changed, but at least in 2011, it lifted a lot of parameters for warrants and how you could kind of get these guys. So I was part of this organization called the Innocent Justice Foundation, which at the time was getting money, and they were training SWAT teams and police officers saying here's how you basically figure out where the perp is. And 1 in 5 of those cases, you would find a child actually on site that was the victim. Okay. It was 98% success or higher. Maybe it was 99. It's at least 98% success conviction rate because you would find on the guy's, computer, here's all the files. We know you did it. It had high conviction rates. So I start talking about that. I'm like, dude, I need to talk about that. My publicist at the time is like, you cannot talk about that in Hollywood. I didn't understand why. I was like, why? Why? Somebody needs to talk about this. This is an issue that desperately needs sunlight. I'm going to not talk about it. She, promptly fired, again, is like, why don't you talk about the ASPCA or abused animals? I'm like, because Betty White's doing a fine job talking about that. Lots of people talk about these issues. Are you kidding me? If people knew this was going on, people would be up in arms about it.
Why do you think they want to hide it? Why do you think the publicists wanted to hide it?
Probably because Hollywood's complicit to it. Now, I don't know that from a personal standpoint. I sort of do, but I think not all Hollywood is bad, but they're totally part of it. Totally part of it. Are you kidding me? So she knows. And she's like, you cannot talk about this in Hollywood. Because I think not all of Hollywood, again, I know so many good people. I hope that I'm one of them, but there are bad players in every industry. And there are definitely bad players in media. Definitely. I mean, the whole Epstein thing, please. P. Diddy, come on. There's so many rings that's going on. Child abuse, child actor abuse. There's a documentary called Quiet on Set. I mean, this is a real thing that's going on in Hollywood, whether people want to face it or not. So I think that she's like, you can't talk about this in Hollywood because you're going to make a lot of enemies. And I'm like, screw that. Again, if there's one hill I would get canceled on, you can't silence me. You can't buy me out when it comes to advocating for children. So that's how I got involved. And this is really important. Then we'll get back to Trafficker A. So the organization, Innocent Justice Foundation, I was not with them, but they went to Sacramento and they asked Sacramento, it was at least $200,000. It was either $200,000 or $250,000. Let's just be conservative and say we asked for $200,000 in order to get more equipment to train law enforcement. Here's how you figure out which cell phone towers these are bouncing off of. It was very ironclad. There was a formula. The dark web didn't really exist so much. Human trafficking was not even a phrase to my knowledge. People were not calling it that. So we had a super high success rate. Go and make the case in Sacramento. We need $200,000 in order to buy this equipment, in order to train law enforcement how to find these perverts and get them locked up forever. We have a 98% conviction rate. Meanwhile, true story, another group, advocacy group, comes and asks for at least $200,000 worth of white paint in order to cover up graffiti. Guess who got funding?
The graffiti.
Mm-hmm. So when we went back and said, well, how could you pay $200,000 for white paint? Wouldn't you agree this is a more serious subject? And this was the answer we got from Sacramento. Now, I don't know who said this. I just know it's somebody from Sacramento in power. We don't get calls about kids being trafficked. You know what we get calls about all the time? Graffiti. So this is the same thing when you're saying politicians don't care. I'm like, look, I think some politicians would care, but it's not a pressing issue. And it's like, that's why we got to make it a pressing issue.
Because they're addicted to this fucking power that they think they have. They really have no power.
The love of power, the love of money.
Because all of them. You see it right now. Like all these people, it's just fucking crazy, man. It's like, you have no fucking power, dude.
You're a representative is how it's supposed to be set up.
You have no power. Yeah. You're fucking scared to talk about kids being trafficked. Mm-hmm. You're powerless. You are completely fucking consumed by this
fear of being canceled, fear of being not elected.
You're consumed by power that doesn't even fucking exist. Mm-hmm. You're completely controlled. You can't even stand up for fucking kids. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because you're addicted to a power that you don't fucking have.
Your position.
And we know you don't have it because you can't talk about fucking kids. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fear.
It's all of them.
Fear
it's
is such
fucking
a
all of them. It's all of them.
Okay. So back to trafficker A. Trafficker A knows he or she cannot be prosecuted. So they adopt a kid out of foster care. They now have all the parental rights. Currently, right now, these are the current stats, because again, this is Friday night. I'm on a plane, gagging as I go down the rabbit hole. I fact-checked this because I just did not want it to be true. Currently, right now in the United States, in 33 states, a parent, trafficker A, can sign away their child to get married before the age of 18. They give parental consent. Child does not have to have their opinion. Child's not asked. I can sign away this child that's now legally mine, trafficker A, to trafficker B. Trafficker B can legally pay trafficker A a bridal fee or a dowry. It's not prosecutable. Because we can call it a bridal fee when what it really is I'm purchasing a human for sex. Now, in these 33 states, 19 of them, if you have a marriage license, you are legally shielded from statutory rape because it's not considered rape inside of marriage. You're not raping a child. You're having sex with your spouse, your husband, your wife.
Holy shit.
And in the other 14, law is tricky, right? That's why you always, if you ever need to be in a lawsuit, you need to get a good attorney because law is subjective to how someone interprets the law. So in those 33 states where trafficker A can sign away their child to trafficker B, in the other remaining 14 states, maybe that person would be prosecuted, but there's a case, right? Because there's a marriage license. It's not a get out of jail free card, but maybe.
Holy shit.
And they know this. There's also something called being rehomed, which is as a parent, if I'm having an issue with my child, I can go send my kid to live with their grandparent or whoever I want. I have that right as a parent. You're going to go live with your aunt. You're going to go live with your neighbor because I can't handle you right now. That's the excuse or whatever it is. Whatever reason. It's called rehoming. They just get trafficked. Yep. Pretty freaking bleak. Yep. So that's one thing that's happening in foster care. And again, that's why I hope it upsets people. But it's what's it going to take for us to get upset enough to become a foster parent? What's it going to take for people to be upset enough to mentor a child in foster care or become a child appointed special advocate, a CASA? You know what I mean? I get it. Not everyone can foster. There's a lot of reasons why people couldn't foster. Maybe, they have a medical diagnosis or something. They're not able to. No one's ever going to put a gun to your head and be you better foster. I get it. Not everyone's called to foster, but everyone is called to foster care. Because if you care about homelessness, if you care about human trafficking victims, if you care about domestic violence, if you care about substance abuse, if you care about child abuse and neglect, this is ground zero. And the statistics I told you earlier, that's the outcomes that happen if we don't step in. But if you step into a child's trauma when they're young, and even as a teenager, we have girls that come through Tulsa Girls Home, which is a qualified residential treatment program, which we can get into. It's a whole thing. Group homes are not designed for kids Like group homes is like one of the last places you put a child. Because it's not good. They've been bounced around. They have so many behavioral issues that they need to end up in a qualified residential treatment program. That's the fancy term for it, a therapeutic group home. They're jacked. Like they land here, they land in like the group home, they are jacked up still. With the right therapy, the right love, the right encouragement, you don't have to be a statistic, the right person saying, you know what, you are more than a statistic, you are more than a number. Statistics are so numbing. These are children. Those stats, they're children. And when people realize that this is a person who has never been told that they matter, when you tell them they matter, even if they're a teenager, those statistics go down. So it's like, we've got to get involved. All right, back to the numbers. This is so crazy. It's all crazy. It's like not like I haven't said 1,000 crazy things. All right. So currently, like I said, Health and Human Services says there are 344,000 children in foster care. AFGAR says about 330. When I got the call to do this interview, I was like, they're like, do you know stats? And I was like, yeah, sure. I went to Congress. I used to be able to rattle them off. So I'm like, let me just quickly look at the AFGAR's report. I can tell you the current numbers. And I see that there's 330,000 in foster care on the AFGAR's report. And I'm like, what? Can't be right. Because when I was like super active in this, on any given day, it was safe to say there are 430,000 children in foster care. So I call it Dr. John DeGarmo, who's the leading expert in foster care in our nation, who does this, eat, breathes, sleeps, like he is an expert witness all across the country. That's what he does. He's an expert on child abuse and neglect in our country. And I'm like, John, can you explain to me what happened? Like, why are the numbers, like, why have they dropped by 100,000 children? Because as long as I was an advocate and as long as everybody I know who has been an advocate, who is blue in the face, we have been like trying to put a dent in this system. How are the numbers this low? What happened? Like, did we really, like, are we fixing this? And he's like, no. It's like the worst thing that's ever happened to foster care. Hidden foster care. I was like, what? Okay. If you look at so there's 344. There used to be 437 kids in foster care at the peak in and around 2018, 2019. There was 437. It was like the worst numbers in foster care. I looked at the AFGAR's report, because again, that's the report that everybody uses, Adoption and Foster Care Reporting, Analysis Reporting System. In 2018, there were 675 children who had any sort of interaction with foster care. They might get a stipend, somehow they're involved with child welfare. They might not be in foster care, 437,000 were in foster care, but 675,000 are being served in some capacity by the child welfare system. In 2024, there's only 505,000 being served by foster care. And I'm like, where did all these kids go? Right? All right. They go to explain this properly, that's 170,000 children gone, cleared off the books. And you can imagine this looks great for all the politicians. Ooh, we're solving foster care. Look at the numbers. They've never been so low. The press release writes itself. But the truth is so much worse. So to understand where these 170 go, I got to put them into two buckets. The first bucket is 55,000 children. This is according to the 2025 report. There's 55,000 children who are in foster care right now, who are in what's called kinship care. Kinship is they're placed with grandma. They're placed with a relative, kin. Okay, they're with some sort of relative. That's called kinship care. 55,000 of them are placed with an unlicensed relative, which is fine. You know, they go with grandma. The problem is when they go to an unlicensed kinship, because that relative is unlicensed, he or she either gets very little assistance financially to pay for all the needs of that child, or they get none. The child often doesn't come with Medicaid. The child doesn't come with therapy and what we call wraparound services, where you're trying to like rehabilitate them. Grandma, let's just call it grandma. Grandma gets no assistance. She's not getting any help. She's doing it out of the goodness of her heart because like maybe her child was an addict and maybe it's not generational. Maybe grandma was a good person and her child just became an addict. You know, that happens. It's horrible. And so her grandkid is going to end up in foster care. Of course, grandma's going to be like, no, put the baby with me. But grandma's not licensed. So grandma's just stuck out here with no services, like doing her best. if grandma's a good person, and a lot of them are. I know many cases where they are. So like, I want to like kudos to the grandmas. I'm pro kinship care when it's a good fit. But if you're not also like giving them assistance, you're not giving them parenting classes they need, if you're not educating grandma on the fact that like there is a huge thing going on right now with like child traffickers, like targeting them online, if she doesn't know, she doesn't have to keep a license, so she doesn't have to have parenting classes. She doesn't have to have like ongoing kind of state of the union that a normal foster parent has to know. Hey guys, you know what's going on is like traffickers are targeting these children online. We take online predator classes. We take like, here's what's going on in child welfare. That's another reason why you can't lower the bar with a home for every child. Like, tell me what's going on. Tell me how to protect these kids. Grandma's not getting any of that. And who's pocketing the money? I guess the government. So there's 55,000 that are over here. Now, there is 100,000 to 300,000 is the current number. Current estimates are between 100,000 and 300,000 children who are in what's called hidden foster care. This is based on the 2024 or 2025 Child Analysis Trend Report put on by the Annie E. Casey Foundation. They're great, to my knowledge. They put out great studies. I assume they're great. These are children who child welfare knows that they need to be removed from the home, but they just rehome them and put them with a relative or somebody else, but there's no court case that's ever opened. There's no record, which means there's no social worker checking up on their welfare. There's nobody looking at them. There's no case. So they've just taken the crisis and moved it off the books. Look at us, we're solving foster care.
Holy.
And you want to know why they're doing that? Of course you do. In 2018, in my opinion, at least in my lifetime, to my knowledge, the worst thing that could have ever happened to foster care happened. It is called, the Family First Prevention and Services Act. Let me tell you what that is. That is, it was a bipartisan act. They had a lot of advocacy groups that were part of crafting the law. The law had great intentions on paper. Okay, so I don't know any of these people. I'm going to assume they had great intentions. Here's what the broad basis idea was. You know what? We have something in the government. I got to like break this down step by step. The broad strokes idea was, what if we, instead of putting children in foster care, focused our energy on prevention so they never enter the system in the first place? It's a great idea. Prevention, great idea. Okay? Family First Services law passes. And there's something in the government called Title 4E. I'm only going to say it once because I don't want to lose people on like the nitty gritty of it. Title 4E is $9.6 billion a year is spent on children in foster care. So it's basically like a federal open checkbook. But the problem with Title 4E and that 9.6 billion with a B dollars is that this money only comes into play after the child has entered foster care. So again, it's bipartisan. This law passed with flying colors. Advocacy groups were part of crafting it. Though I remember Dr. John DeGarmo specifically, and a lot of my friends were like, this is going to be a disaster, and it has been. When the 2018 Family First Prevention Services Act came along, they were like, hey, why don't we take some of the Title 4E $9.6 billion and put it toward prevention? Great. This is a great idea on paper. On paper, I could be a huge supporter of this. Here's why. The majority of kids who end up in foster care because of neglect. And many of that neglect is poverty-related neglect. Okay, so again, not to oversimplify it, because a social worker really is not, to my knowledge, in any case I've really heard, just like yanking a kid out of foster care or out of their home because they don't have anywhere to put them. But there are a lot of times where the kid enters foster care because of poverty-related neglect, which means they don't have a bed, mom doesn't have groceries, mom's a single mom. There are amazing organizations. One is called Care Portal. I'm obsessed with Care Portal. Care Portal is a Christian organization that's basically like the Christian Craigslist of foster care. So the whole premise of it is prevention. The whole premise is like, hey, let's apply common sense to this crappy system. maybe if mom is single and she doesn't have food in her pantry and she can't afford a bed for the child, maybe instead of traumatizing all parties involved, we should just get the mom a bed, fill her pantry. And by the way, as the church, wrap around that mom and be like, hey, sweetheart, being a single mom is gotta be tough. What can we do as a church to help you? Right? So there are amazing organizations that are helping with prevention. So Family First Prevention Services Act passes, and the idea is like, let's prevent children from entering care. Great. What it ended up creating was more bureaucracy and red tape on a system that already had enough bureaucracy and red tape. So it's caused a lot of problems. Very first problem that it's created is, it's like, oh my gosh, I've got so many things swimming in my head. I'm like, I want to tell you all the things about Family First Prevention Services Act. I would say the first problem that advocates talk about with Family First Prevention Services Act of 2018 is that Congress decided in order to make sure prevention is actually working, we're only going to give the money allocated for prevention to programs that have at least 50% of the money that we're allocating for this whole prevention thing. At least 50% of the budget has to go toward programs that have like the most high scientific data behind them. Also, sounds great. Sounds like common sense. However, there are many wonderful programs that common sense would say, get the mom groceries, get the mom a bed. That is preventing that child from entering foster care. But because they're in a rural community or they're serving minority and maybe they're in a lower income area, they can't afford the research. They're not like tied to some like fancy college running data analysis. So social workers found themselves being like, okay, even though we know this service prevents children from entering care, we can't do anything about it because they don't have research. So that was one problem. Yeah. The next, and so like the solution to that, the common sense solution to that would be like, all right, look, you can do several things. You can, instead of creating like this government federal clearinghouse list, that's what it is. Like these people have to be on a list. Their program like definitely has scientific research, showing that their program works. You could just get an expert panel to be like, you know what? This program's working. We see it, Put an expert panel on it is like one of the many solutions you could do for that. But that's one of the problems that Family First Prevention Services Act caused. More bureaucracy. Second, it funds the entirely wrong thing. And it's like, Shawn, I don't even know of all there's 7 problems that this whole system has created. I don't know which one makes my blood boil the most. Maybe this one. I don't know until I get to the next one. It funds the totally wrong thing, okay? So you have social workers. Social workers, again, like I said, some of them have 86 kids on their case. They are doing their best. The one thing that Child Welfare Services does that no other government office does is called case management. Case management looks like coordinating the visitations, the monitored visits, making sure that the biological parent is getting the parenting classes he or she needs, making sure that they get the drug and substance abuse program, that they need, making sure that the social worker is like air traffic control for, talking to the court, talking to the guardian ad litem, talking to the therapist, talking to the foster parent, and making sure that there's a holistic view of what is going on. That's called case management. That's what you would think that you would fund with prevention services, but they didn't fund that. Instead, the prevention services, whoever was in charge of it, decided that what they would fund is like, let's fund the drug substance abuse program. Let's fund the therapy for the child. Let's fund, whatever the hell they're funding. And again, that sounds great until you realize that Medicaid already covers that. So now what happened is these social workers who just want to do case management, their entire day is now taken up pointing fingers, trying to decide how to exhaust Medicaid before they can get any Title IV-E money put into their case. So it's like, who's funding what? Now who's on first? And so critics of the Family First Prevention Services Act would say, let Medicaid fund what Medicaid funds, and let us fund case management. You want to hear something else that's crazy? Another problem? This is mind-boggling to me. Family First Prevention and Services Act of 2018 does not require any data attached to it. There are no analytics. So they say prevention works, but they have no way to measure
what?
The outcomes. Correct.
What?
Correct. So states are not required by this law. This law does not require states to measure the outcomes. So they can track how much they're spending, but they can't track whether it's working. There is no data system that shows how many people did your program help? How many kids actually were successfully prevented from entering foster care? Nobody knows because the law does not require the data to be measured.
Holy.
Next problem. Residential treatment programs got way harder. So, again, I think this law had great intentions. A lot of experts like Dr. DeGarmo was like, this is gonna be a train wreck. There were a lot of people that saw the red flags, but for whatever reason, nobody listened to them. And by the way, there's been a lot of advocates advocating for things to change, and I'm not 100% sure why, but they don't even make it to the floor. And I think it's because, if I'm just speculating, I think everybody kind of wants to get credit for passing a bill, but nobody wants to own up to the unintended consequences of the bill, right? Everybody wants to point their fingers. So residential treatment programs. There was an old 1965 Medicaid law called the IMD, the Institutions for Mental Disease Law of 1965. This law was a Medicaid law that was passed in order to, basically, it blocked Medicaid federal funding for mental health institutions for adults, right? Because the federal government's like, we don't want to pay forever for an adult who's just going to end up in a mental institution for the rest of their life. And I have a lot of compassion on people that live in mental institutions. I could talk about that for days. I have a lot of empathy there. There was a law, whatever, 1965, IMD, Institutions for Mental Disease, passed in 1965. It was meant for adults. It was never meant to touch children in foster care. But when the Family First Prevention Services Act of 2018 passed, what an unintended consequence of that was that group homes, if they had more than 16 beds, or residential therapeutic treatment programs had more than 16 beds, now they were like, ooh, are they falling under the old 1965 IMD law? We can't fund this anymore. So you have these great programs, and I believe Child Help, actually, which is an organization I love, I think this is one of the ways it backfired on them. They used to have a village in California, and in that village, it was like a bunch of cottages. They were little like group homes that were like in a neighborhood structure. There's a school on the property. There was therapy. And these are kids that have been so severely abused that the federal government's like, there is no hope for this. There's no hope for this child. Like, just send them to jail or send them to the mental institution. There is no going back with this child. And the founders of Child Help, over 60 years ago, were like, not on our watch. Let's just give it a go. I think love can heal a child. So they opened up this village, for example, in Beaumont, California. I used to be one of their mentors, but the program's been shut down. And it shut down as one of the consequences of Family First Prevention Services Act. It complicated it. Children who end up at Child Help are literally, I know this case, children that, like, some of them were raised as dogs, for example. They've been raised their entire life in a cage. They made it to 9 years old. They don't know they're not a dog. No one's ever taught them how to speak English. They don't know how to eat food. They don't know how to speak. They don't know they're not a dog. You can't put that child in a foster home. You can't. That's why there's levels to foster care. There's normal foster homes. There's trauma-informed therapeutic foster homes. There's group homes. There's qualified residential treatment programs. And then there's jail and mental institutions. And then there was Child Help. So of course they have more than 16 beds. And the outcomes for the children who went through Child Help are incredible. Some of them went to go on to be like politicians, lawyers, doctors, teachers. These are the most severely abused cases that the federal government literally ships them in from all 50 states. And they're like, if you don't help them, nobody else will. Child Help, their village in California, doesn't exist anymore. Because you lose all your funding because somehow, nobody wants to pay for that anymore. So that was one of the problems. And I don't know if that's specifically why Child Help got shut down. It was like a compounding of a lot of issues. It's kind of a complicated issue, but like that was one of the compoundings. You have something that this law of 2018 created, and it's called Qualified Residential Treatment Program. People in social, in foster care, they call it a QRTP. I'm not going to do abbreviations for you. That is a group home that provides a lot of therapy. That's what Tulsa Girls Home is. So you get the cases where like kids been bounced around, adopted to be raped. That's extremely common. That happened with the girl that we took in at 18. We asked her, we said, do you want us to adopt you? And she was like, no. And we were like, whoa. And she's like, sorry. When I hear adoption, to me, that means rape. And I know you guys don't want to rape me, but
Jeez.
That's what I hear.
Jeez.
That's not uncommon. Yes. And it's not the first time I've heard it, Shawn. I can tell you at least 5 kids that I've talked to that have said the same thing. I'm sorry, adoption means rape to me. And then once they're caught in that adoptive home for being raped, if they're caught, they just get put back in the system. It's so jacked. So, Family First Prevention Services Act created something called a QRTP, which is a Qualified Residential Treatment Program. And they basically said, we're going to put these kids into this program, but we want to eliminate all these programs because the whole idea is if the statistics are so bleak, the statistics we went over, they age out, they become homeless, substance abuse problems, arrest pipeline, all of that. Well, they look at the data and it says that if they lived in a group home, their statistical, outcomes, likelihood of having these outcomes is 2.5 times more likely if they end up in a group home. It's not the therapeutic group home that's causing those statistics. It's that by the time you've worked your way up from family to family to family where you need a group home, it's the trauma. It's the unresolved trauma that nobody wanted to deal with. It's not the qualified residential, therapeutic treatment program that's causing that outcome. Nobody's looking at it right. And the other thing that this law created for people that are actually doing it right is the assessment to get into the residential treatment program that was put into place, more bureaucracy because of this law, is maddening. It's called the CANS system. I do not know what CANS stands for. It's on all 50 states. Before a child can receive the therapeutic level of treatment that they need, like at Tulsa Girls Home, there has to be some sort of analysis that's run on them to determine whether they're eligible for those services. But it's like a online portal that has some sort of strange algorithm that nobody can figure out. And we've seen this at Tulsa Girls Home. Hey, this girl is suicidal. She is cutting and she says she's going to kill herself and this, and that. Hey, this girl is suicidal. She's cutting herself and this, and that. Same case on paper. She qualifies. She doesn't. Why? I don't know. Thank you, Family First Prevention Services Act, for trying to prevent these kids from ending up in group homes. It's bizarre. And then another problem that's complicated because of it is that there was this thing, it's a fancy term, is revenue neutrality trap. All that means is that instead of creating an entirely new revenue stream to say, you know what, we believe in prevention, but we know that we're going to have to pump money into preventative services. We want to stop the kid from ever entering foster care. Instead of creating a revenue stream and building this up and working toward prevention, let's get those families, especially if they're poverty-related neglect, let's get them taken care of, which is not what Family First Prevention Services Act is budgeted for. Instead of doing all of that, sorry, I lost my place because it's literally just it's the messiest thing in the world, but it's okay. Oh, I lost my place. Let me look it up. Where is it? Where's the bullet point? Revenue neutrality. Okay. Yeah. So instead of just creating a new revenue stream, whoever they is, Congress thought, if we want to stop group home placements, we'll just defund the group homes and assume that we can put these kids back with normal families. But again, if the kid qualifies for a group home, they're so jacked up that they need this level of care. You can't put them with a foster parent. And most foster parents won't take them because they're I'm not qualified for that level of trauma. I'm not a therapist. I don't have, it's a totally different set of qualification that would qualify you to take a child that has been through that much trauma. So there's nowhere to put them. So all these kids fall into the gap. Now they're being put in detention home centers because it's oh crap. We shut down your therapeutic residential treatment program. You didn't qualify to get in. Now we have nowhere to place you. I guess we'll just put you into a hotel until you age out.
Jeez. Or jail.
So they basically burned the bridge before they it was like, let them get the therapy they need. You assumed that these kids, if you took the therapy away, that they wouldn't need it, but they need it. And then they did not do the math on there's nowhere to put them.
Who comes up with this?
Dude, I don't even know. It's again, there were advocacy groups. It was bipartisan. I don't know why people didn't see the red flags. But regardless, if you didn't see the red flags, but now you do, by the way, 2025 study, 8 years in, it was 7 years in was the data. We're 8 years in now. Data showed from 2025, that of that $9.6 billion, only 2 cents of every dollar actually went toward prevention. And of that 2 cents, 60% went to administrative drag because there's so much paperwork now that all the kids are falling into the gap. Nobody can keep up with the paperwork because you got to have research and you got to have Medicaid billing first and you got to have all the paperwork and you got to have the CANS assessment. You got to prove that this kid is jacked up enough to need this therapy. And so all of these social workers who are already bogged down are bogged down with even more paperwork. And here's the stats. Here's the current stats as the result. 36% turnover rate in social workers within 18 months. That's just the national average. It's 57% in Florida. 18-month turnover rate. It might be annual in Florida. Foster parents, depending upon where you're surveying them, 30 to 50% of foster parents burn out within 12 months because you feel like you're in the system. The good players are quitting because they're like, I can't win. It's the worst thing that ever happened to foster care. And nobody wants to take blame for it. So nobody's really addressing the issue. And so again, it sounds so bleak, but my answer is then good people have to foster. Because you're never going to solve all of this. But if you advocate for a kid, and you actually champion your social worker, who might seem like a total jerk, but maybe they're just overworked, underpaid, and feel like they're not making any difference, so they're depressed. Social workers don't feel like they have any say. Guardians ad litem, the lawyers, sometimes they feel like they have no say. And it's because foster care is so complicated that every single person has a piece and nobody has total control. But you got to get the good people to stay in the fight. You got to fund the social workers, fund the case management. Let Medicaid pay for what Medicaid pays for already. This is such a mess.
How do you fix it?
I genuinely think that the number one way to fix it is you get better people in the fight. You recruit better foster parents. You give them community. You support your social workers. You petition Congress or your representatives. Make the phone calls. Hey, it's not about graffiti this time. It's about children. Make them care. Put the pressure on them. And get involved. I mean, it's like if you care about homelessness, all these things, like if you care about all these things and ground zero is foster care, you have to get involved. If you don't want to be a foster parent, there are so many ways people can get involved. If you're a hairdresser, these girls in foster care, they've never had their hair done. On prom night, on homecoming night, just open up your salon. Do like free.
Just make them feel good.
Just make them feel pretty. It seems so simple, but they will remember that for the rest of their life. They've never felt pretty. They've never felt worthy. Open up your salon and let them come. You might not feel like you're doing heavy lifting, but for that kid, it was like the first time they were told that they deserve to feel like everybody else. Give them school supplies. Don't give them trash bags. Donate your suitcases. Get involved in Care Portal. Tell your church to get involved. Get involved. People have to get involved. The Christians have no excuse. We have no excuse. We were not called to a life of convenience.
It's true. Damn, man.
I know.
Want to take another break?
Sure.